Pop quiz. How did Scotland get its name? For any Irish folks watching, you perhaps take pride in knowing the answer. Scotland was named for, well, the Scots, which originally referred to inhabitants of Ireland. Turns out the Gaelic/Goidelic Celtic speakers of Ireland didn't just bring the Gaelic language and later whiskey to Scotland, they also brought the country's name. Granted, as far as anyone can tell, the Irish term Scots and its Old English equivalent Scotus were both derived from the late Latin Scoti, meaning essentially Irish people, or Gaelic speakers in Hibernia, if you want to get technical, as Hibernia was the classical Latin name for Ireland. Keep that in mind, it's going to become relevant again in a few minutes. Now, you can find the term Scoti being used in this context all the way back in 312 CE, when the Romans included it in a list of tribes that they believed posed a threat to their empire. As to how the Romans came up with the name Scoti to refer to the Irish/Hiberno-Gaels, that's where the scholarship hits a brick wall. Make that a stone wall. Hadrian's Wall? The consensus seems to be that Scoti does ultimately have a Celtic origin. We'll explore some modern etymological theories toward the end of this video, but in the absence of a single decisive etymology of Scots, mythology has been left to fill in that gap. And anyone who's ever done even a cursory search on the subject has no doubt encountered this illustration. It comes from the Scoti Chronicon, which is easily one of the best book titles ever. Although actually it's a collection of 16 books compiled/composed by Scottish historian Walter Bauer between the years of 1440 and 1447 CE. The illustration depicts Scota, the daughter of an Egyptian pharaoh, fleeing Egypt in a ship alongside her husband Gaithalos, aka Goidel Glass, a Greek prince who was, quote, good-looking but mentally unstable. End quote. I encourage you to read the first book of the Scoti Chronicon yourself to uncover more of these fantastic details. Just keep in mind that this first book, and actually the first several books of the Scoti Chronicon, are a retread of the Scottish priest John of Forden's 14th century Chronica Gentis Scotorum, or Chronicles of the Scottish People. Bauer basically stuck Forden's work at the beginning of his own chronicle, and then picked up the story where the earlier chronicler had left off. His goal being to create a comprehensive history of Scotland. But perhaps history is the wrong word here. Forden couldn't determine why exactly Scota and Goidel Glass ended up fleeing Egypt, so he included multiple different versions of the event in his chronicle, all of which begin in the year 1550 BCE, with Scota's father, the pharaoh, drowning in the Red Sea during his pursuit of some fella by the name of Moses. In one version, Egyptian peasants, fearing Goidel Glass might try to fill the resulting power vacuum, quote, drove the king's son-in-law right out of the kingdom along with his followers. So all the nobles, both Greek and Egyptian alike, whom the voracious sea had failed to devour, were cruelly driven away by peasants enrolled in a servile uprising, end quote. In another version, it's not the fear of an uprising that sends Egyptian and Greek nobles packing, Scota and Goidel Glass among them, it's the fear of divine retribution. And I quote, seeing the fearful plagues and portents with which they had been inflicted through Moses, they were very much afraid, and they did not dare stay there any longer. For just as the lands of the people of Gomorrah, together with the inhabitants of Sodom, were once upon a time reduced to ashes on account of their sins, so they expected that the whole of Egypt would suddenly be overturned along with its inhabitants. End quote. Precise reason aside, Scota and Goidel Glass load their household onto a skiff, as do the other nobles, and they escape Egypt by river. And during the 40 years Moses wanders in the wilderness with his followers, so too do Scota and Goidel Glass wander with their followers, albeit in northwestern Africa. The Egyptian exiles then sailed to the Iberian Peninsula, where they found what will become the Portuguese city of Porto. Indeed, they named the place in honor of their patriarch, dubbing it Portus Goidel, from which the country of Portugal allegedly takes its name. Don't worry, we'll get to Scotland eventually. But first, Ireland. Because as the story goes, Goidel Glass's dying wish is that his sons, the eldest among them named Hyber, settle on a beautiful island that he had seen north of the Iberian Peninsula. Hyber ends up landing in what is now Ulster and names the area in honor of his mother Scota. But because of his association with the island, the whole of the island becomes known as Hibernia. Meanwhile, the people who settle there take on the names of both their patriarch and matriarch. Hence, they become known as the Goidels, or Gaels, as well as the Scoti, or Scots. And when those same people start settling in northern Britain, the names come with them. The people become known as the Scots, and their language, Scots Gaelic. So there you have it. One boatload of people from Egypt gave us names for Portugal, Ireland, and Scotland. Or did it? Because, as I alluded to earlier, none of this is settled history, or etymology. It belongs solely to the realm of myth and legend. The story first appears in the Laur Gaula Erin, or Book of the Taking of Ireland, better known as the Book of Invasions. Specifically, the redaction, i.e. version of the Book of Invasions, recorded in the 12th century Book of Leinster. Although in this earliest iteration of the tale, or at least the earliest iteration to feature Scota, more on that in a minute, the Egyptian princess isn't married to Goidel, aka Gaidel Glass. She's his mother. And Goidel's grandfather is given as the Scythian king and Tower of Babel builder, Phineas Farsed, namesake of the legendary Irish warrior band, the Fenians, aka the Fianna. Pulling from the 72 languages that arise after the fall of the Tower of Babel, Goidel creates the Goidelic/Gaelic language, hence the name. Goidel also comes face to face with Moses, who cures him of a snakebite with some prayer and a touch of his staff. And in an addendum to the tale, a green ring then appears on Goidel's skin in that spot, hence the epithet Glas, meaning green. In later versions of the Book of Invasions, meanwhile, Scota is reimagined as Scotia, wife of one of Goidel Glass's descendants, Mil Espana, who rules over ancient Iberia. Mil Espana is the namesake of the country of Spain, naturally, as well as the Milesians, who are the last of Ireland's mythical invaders, replacing the Tuatha De Danann, i.e. the Irish gods, as the island's rulers. Thus, to this very day, you can go to Munster and visit Scotia's grave. Or at least you can visit a site with that name. Because as Ireland's National Monuments Service has noted, quote, following a site inspection in 1999, it was concluded that the evidence was not sufficient to warrant accepting this as an archaeological monument, end quote. No. Scota/Scotia was not a historical person, which explains her conspicuous absence from the oldest extant version of Ireland's invasions story found in the 9th century Welsh work Historia Britonum, or History of the Britons. There is, however, mention of a Goidel Glass-like character, a Scythian noble who is exiled from Egypt during the time of Moses and who travels with his household to northern Africa, then Iberia, where he stays for, checks notes, 2,000 years, then he travels to Ireland before finally reaching Scotland, specifically Dalriada, a Gaelic kingdom that encompassed Scotland's western seaboard as well as a chunk of northeastern Ireland. Here's the thing though, this character is never named in the text, because clearly the name came later. The Gaels and their Goidelic language weren't named for Goidel Glass, it was the other way around. And the same is true for Scota. Medieval scribes invented it to provide an origin for the name Scots. As Irish Studies professor Joseph Lennon explained in his 2004 book Irish Orientalism, quote, many Irish legend makers created ancestors in order to account for the various names of a people. For example, Gaidel Glass for the Gaels and Scota for the Scots through the practice known as eponymy. End quote. The Fenians being named for Phineas Farsed, and Spain being named for Mil Espana, and Hibernia being named for Hyber, and Portugal being named for Goidel are all examples of this practice in action. Of course, there was another force at work here in addition to eponymy, one that can help explain why an ostensibly Gaelic tale would have its main characters intermingling with biblical figures. Christianization. Remember, the folks who first recorded the myths of the Scots/Gaels were Christian scribes, and they did their best to fold the gods, heroes, and monsters of these myths into a Christian framework. Thus, the Tuatha Dé Danann are dubbed fallen angels, and the hero Finn McCool is given a lineage that can be traced back to Adam in the Garden of Eden. The original pre-Christian versions of the Gaelic myths, passed down orally for generations, would not have included such details, because until the arrival of Palladius and then Patrick in Ireland, such Christian concepts would not have been known to the majority of Gaels. To be sure, this playbook was applied not just to the Gaels, but to every culture Christianity encountered. For example, in his 12th century Historia Scholastica, French theologian Peter Commister contended that at the same time Scota and Goidel fled Egypt, a one Kecrop fled as well and hopped over to Greece where he'd found a little city called Athens. What's more, a rambunctious fella by the name of Dionysian Bacchus would also flee from Egypt to Greece at this time, bringing with him the knowledge of the winemaking process. Even within the Bible, we can see authors making an effort to weave cultural narratives together. For example, in the Gospel of Mark, widely considered to be the earliest of the synoptic Gospels, give Mark and Priority a Google if you're interested, Jesus of Nazareth is said to be from, well, Nazareth. There is no mention of Bethlehem. It's likely that later writers looked at this and saw a missed opportunity to fulfill a prophecy laid out in the book of Micah, which said the Messiah would be born in Bethlehem. Thus, they concocted the census story and got their boy born in Bethlehem. All this to say, Scotland wasn't named for an Egyptian princess. It's an awesome story, yes, and I love a good story, hence this channel. But after seeing so many posts and videos and even comments on my own videos conflating mythology with history, I felt compelled to provide some clarification. So, how did Scotland get its name? In her 2013 paper, The Celts, Questions of Nomenclature and Identity, linguist Kim McCone argued that the name came from the Irish Scot, meaning flower or pick, reasoning that members of Ireland's upper class were once known as Scotus, meaning flowers, or Scotí, meaning the pick of the population. Then there's Celtic scholar Philip Freeman's 2001 theory that the name is derived from the Indo-European root Scot, noting that in ancient Greek, Skotos meant gloom or darkness. So maybe some Gaelic raiders adopted the name to sound scary, or it was thrust upon them. Kind of the opposite of what McCone was going for. Swedish writer Jacob Trudson Demetz, meanwhile, argued in 1996 that our modern Scot came from an Old Norse word for a tax, Scot. Specifically, this was a reference to a ceremony wherein placing a clump of earth on someone's lap would symbolize the transfer of land to a new owner. I mean, sure. Then there are the older explanations, like military historian Charles Omans from 1910, which held that Scot was derived from the Gaelic skitch, meaning a man cut off, a reference to the Scots being an outcast group of raiders separate from the Gaels. And finally, there was Glaswegian author Angus MacConaughey's 1867 assertion that the name originated with the Gaelic scoi, meaning swarm. If none of these proposed etymologies sound as cool as having Scotland being named after an exiled seafaring Egyptian princess who would become the progenitor of all Gaelic-speaking peoples and who was part of a family that would also bestow names upon the countries of Spain, Portugal, and Ireland, then we're probably on the right track. Or at the very least, by sticking to mundane but plausible etymologies, we're staying on the right side of Occam's razor. As a parting bit of wisdom, I will leave you with the following quotation from one of the world's greatest archaeologists. We cannot afford to take mythology at face value. If you enjoyed this video, please like and comment, and basically just tap all of the little buttons, and by the end of it, make sure you are subscribed to the Irish Myths channel. That really helps. I've also got some books linked below you might be interested in. Might I recommend Samhain in Your Pocket, a tiny little book about the Celtic origins of Halloween. As always, my name is I.E. Kneverday, editor of the short story anthology Neon Druid and creator of IrishMyths.com. Thanks for coming out.